Ed Bernstein Show. Now, here's Ed.
Well, you know, what happens in the city affects more of us than what happens oftentimes in the federal government. And with me now is Brian Knudsen from the Las Vegas City Council. And, you know, for years, you know, we used to have these elections in the city. They used to be in the spring and off-year elections, and the turnout was, boy, just horrible, right? Like horrific. I mean, maybe 10, 15%.
4,000 or 5,000 people.
So of 4,000 or 5,000 people, I mean, then there was multiple candidates running. Somebody could literally get elected to an office with 1,000 or 2 votes.
That's it.
Right, as they split all the votes. And but that was changed, fortunately. I mean, I thought it was a good idea to change it. Now they have the elections in November, yes, in the typical election years, and there's more response. Have you noticed a change because of that?
I think there's a positive and a negative. So the positive would be that significantly more people are voting.
Right.
The negative would be is that they are trying to tie you to a political candidate or a political affiliation. And so City Council was really intended to be nonpartisan because 99.9% of the decisions we make are about daily lives. It has nothing to do with partisan politics. But being on an election cycle and a November cycle especially kind of brings out that air of politics, and that's the first question that most people ask is your political affiliation. Yeah, I think that's a negative. I don't think government, especially local government, is really that political. But I think that's the trend is people are wanting it to be more political, unfortunately.
Now, the county commission runs the same way as the city council, and it's nonpartisan.
No, that actually
it is partisan.
It is partisan. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Then I was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so the city council is
nonpartisan. Yes.
And so do you think that's a better system in general, that people just run from any party and don't have to go through a primary in a party?
You know, at the local level, I just think government and politics are very different. And as people want to make it a government agency more political, my background is I worked for the city of Las Vegas for 10 years. I've been in policy and strategy for government for a good chunk of my career. None of the decisions that are made at the local level have anything really to do with what you see in the media on Twitter or Facebook, or is what's being pushed out as the politicians' beliefs. That's really not what government is. And so I like to focus in on all of the things that government can do for people, and there are beliefs around how much government should do or shouldn't do, but the decision-making really isn't political at all. And so I don't know, I like government being just, let's do what's best for people, and there's lots of opinions on how we do that.
So how does the city council elections work now? So during a primary, any number of candidates from any political party,
yes,
can run against each other.
Yes.
And if somebody gets 50% plus one, they're elected at the primary.
Correct.
Right? And if nobody gets that 50% plus one, then the top 2 candidates run in a general.
That's it.
And on the ballot, there's no a specification of any party.
Nope. And that'll be, for the city of Las Vegas, we have 6 individuals represented by wards. We have 6 wards, and then the mayor of Las Vegas is elected at large. So in our next cycle coming up in 2024, those people who are interested in filing for office will file in, let's say, March-ish timeframe for a primary in June. The top 50% plus one winners will be sworn in then. The top 2, if they don't get 50%, will go on to a November election, and then that winner will be sworn in December.
And that's also a whole lot more time between the primary and the general than it used to be. At one time, there was like a 2 or 3 month difference between the primary and the general. Now there's several months.
Yes. Yeah.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
The landscape for local elected officials in Las Vegas is changing. It changed the last cycle because we're on cycle with legislators running, with county commissioners running, with federal delegation running, with president running. And so it creates this enormous amount of pressure to raise enough money to get your message out there to your constituents. And so you're competing with, for my cycle, I'll be competing with the President of the United States in that messaging, because I really want people to know what I do for Ward 1, but they also need to know what the President of the United States is doing and make informed decisions when they do hit the ballot box.
And that was going to be my next topic of conversation, because that's the negative of running in November against not only the president, U.S. senators, all the Congress people, state legislators, right? Judges.
Yeah.
And I know, look, I talk about this often with judges particularly, because people vote. You get this ballot, and you have all these offices, and you're watching television, and every commercial is either for a presidential candidate, a Senate candidate, or a congressional candidate, right? Because nobody else has the money, or and you can't, even if you had the money, you can't even get the TV time
right.
to even do a commercial. Now, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing, because as you know, you're doing a commercial. It's not really something to base a vote on most of the time. But the flip side of that is that people never get to know who the real candidates are, with judges and the city council candidates and legislative candidates to a great extent.
I found it interesting when I was campaigning the first time. You go and knock on thousands of doors. The most consistent message I got was, who are you? And we want to read about you on Facebook. We want to read about your thoughts on Twitter. We want social media. And my thought is, like, let me buy you a cup of coffee. I'll tell you who I am, and you either like me or you don't like me. But it's changing. That's how politics are changing for me. That's why the candidates are so pressured to put something out there.
I mean, but do you think that's an effective way to do it? I know, because, look, most people go through Facebook. I mean, who reads beyond the photo and the caption? Right?
Twitter is 140 characters, and they base their entire opinion based on 140 characters. That's the challenging part of that.
Right. So it's really the old-fashioned way. Go out and knock on doors.
For me, I would love to just do a debate in a church, and somebody poses some questions for you, some challenging questions about the role of government, the role that you want to play, and then people can cast their vote. That was the olden days, and it's not like that anymore. The number of people you have to reach and connect with so that they know your name on a ballot, that's the challenging part, and social media helps in that. Airtime helps with that. Mailers help with that. It's a different dynamic politically.
Right. So, is it working or it's not working, do you think?
I would love to say it's working well. I think that I wish we could go back a couple steps backward and go more to a debate style forum. That would be my preference, is let's talk about real issues. What does the government do? What's your role in government? And let people make informed decisions. I wish people wanted to be more informed, because you just can't get informed as much as you want over social media.
Right. Everybody just wants a soundbite.
Yes.
Okay. So meanwhile, so you talked a little bit about your background. You worked for the city for 10 years, and is that something you go to school for, or how does that work?
I did. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I went to University of Utah, and I had degrees in health education and emergency management. I went to graduate school at University of Southern California, and I had a degree in public administration. That was my government side, and I rolled that or used that to work for the city, mostly in policy and strategy. So I worked with all of the city council for my entire 10 years that I was at the city.
Now, you were a kid, and you said, "Boy, when I grow up, I want to work on these governmental issues and health management." I mean, did you have that kind of drive growing up, or it's just where did it come from?
Always very driven. I love government, absolutely love it, and it's because it's not one particular issue. Like, I can spend, this morning we spent time talking about septic tanks in our community and how much water septic tanks are taking. This afternoon, I'm going to spend some time with law enforcement and talking about their role in some of our unhoused folks, the homeless folks that are living on the streets, and how law enforcement. So I go from septic tanks to law enforcement to healthcare, and later tonight I'll be talking with some doctors around how we can improve the medical district. So I get to use every brain cell I have to try to figure out how we can make a better world, and that's what I love about government.
Let's talk about some of those issues, because when I talk to people in this city, it seems to me that the overwhelming issue is homelessness downtown.
Yeah.
Right. Basically, I've been downtown for almost 50 years. I've seen it. Never seems to change much. And look, we have great empathy for people who are homeless. But they do create issues for tourists and for businesses in downtown. So how do you balance those two things?
So I've chose to focus in on the core issues. So there's definitely the push to go and hide people. I get those calls every single day, come and remove these people from a sidewalk, come and remove these people from my front yard. I get those calls. Unfortunately, all that does is kind of bounce people around from location to location. That becomes very complicated and expensive.
And so where would you even bounce them to? I hate the word. I mean, where would you move them to?
So the typical response is we have a CARES team. It's our city calls it the MORE team. It's social service agencies that go out to an individual or an encampment of individuals and say, can we help you? And we'd love for you to get on our shuttle, and we're going to take you to our courtyard. We're going to take you to a shelter. We're going to take you to a medical appointment. But this isn't an appropriate location for you to be, for whatever reason. If people are unresponsive to that, asking for support, then we have a Metro response or a DPS response from the City of Las Vegas, a police presence, to go and say this is an inappropriate location and you have a couple of options. We're going to ask you to walk away peacefully, or within the downtown core, there is an ordinance that the city passed that would allow the officer to make a citation or an arrest. I can tell you those citations and arrests have zero impact. They don't work at all. What I've found that's most effective is offering a warm hand to say, let's get you into services as quickly as we possibly can and try to find housing for you. The housing is a big issue. Right now, we're about 80,000 units short within the city of Las Vegas. So we're going to be going through this for a while until we figure out the housing issue for folks and we have this right supportive services in place.
80,000. I'm trying to wrap my arms around that number. I mean, 80,000. I mean, that's a significant number. I mean, not only financially, but also, just population-wise.
This is the previous governor and the county and the city kind of all worked together over this last legislative session and with the ARP funds to build out funding mechanisms for significant number of apartment buildings to go into our community. Also very controversial, but that is the issue. If you work at Starbucks or you work at Target and you're making minimum wage or a little bit more than minimum wage, you're not going to be able to afford buying a house. That's out of the question. Right now, you really can't afford a market rate apartment either. And so that's the role of government, is trying to figure out how we can make sure the private sector has employees and that they're living somewhere appropriately, and that we build out apartment complexes for people that they can afford. And so you'll see that now. It's kind of coming into play in my ward. Decatur Commons is a Nevada Hand property. It's on Decatur and Meadows and Alta. It's a senior property. It's a multifamily. It's about 400 units. So we have 80,000 units in the valley. 400 units is a drop in the bucket, but you're going to see more and more of those apartment complexes within the city and the county to help meet the need of that population that's really in the service industry, that's keeping our community going.
And and so the city supports some of the rent for those, but the residents still pay rent, or how does that work?
We support the construction, and so that's where the rubber meets the road for the development community. Is they need to make it pencil, and we want to make sure that everybody needs to make a living. That's how developers choose to make their living. And so the city of Las Vegas creates funds, the state creates funds for developers to come in and build out an apartment complex where they can keep the rent somewhat controlled for people who are never going to be able to make enough money to afford a market rate apartment. So those are the apartment complexes you're going to see all over town, really, is developers who are building apartments that have some level of subsidy, either land or in financial incentives for the government to make it affordable.
You mentioned you had, went to school with for the medical component part of government. I remember, and maybe it was years ago, previous governor, and I don't remember, maybe it was Kenny Gwynn at the time, or maybe even earlier, that we had a budget issue in the state. And one of the things that they stopped doing was providing medication to homelessness, homeless people, outpatients. At that time, a lot of the homeless would be able to, get daily medication and be gainfully employed and get off the streets. Well, during a budget crisis, that went away. I saw the number of people in the street increase. And I was just curious, is that back available yet for people who are homeless to be able to get medication to keep them active and employed? Because one thing, you can give them a house, you can take them to wherever you're going to take them, but they're not going to have a quality of life unless they get to the core issue of what the problem is.
Yep. So the system switched over around Kenny Gwynn, and then with Brian Sandoval, our governors, Brian Sandoval and Governor Quinn, it switched over a little bit, so it went to a more private model, as opposed to the state being actively engaged with that population at the Adult Mental Health Campus, which is in Ward 1, right next to the College of Southern Nevada. It switched to a fee-for-service or a Medicaid model. So right now the state has a contract with 4 managed care organizations. About 80% of our population who is homeless qualify for Medicaid. And so those managed care organizations, which are private companies, have an obligation to connect with that individual and provide them everything they need from a medication perspective or physical or mental health perspective. The challenge is connecting, making sure that connection is viable. And if you are living on the street, getting to a pharmacy is a bit of a challenge. Taking medication on a regular basis is a bit of a challenge. And attending physical or mental health appointments is a bit of a challenge.
Is there a mechanism of getting the medication to them instead of them coming into a pharmacy? Yeah.
So the city is piloting something. There's nothing that's perfect, but we have our homeless courtyard. On the courtyard site, we have a small pharmacy and medical services, and we now have 3 aero vans that can take people to appointments. So if you lack a house, lack somewhere to go, you can go to the courtyard, you can get medications there, you can get seen by some level of healthcare person, an EMT or a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist. And then there are vans that will take you to appointments within wherever your appointments are, really. So we're trying things.
And is it is it increasing, the population of homelessness increasing in Vegas?
A tiny bit. I can't remember the last homeless count, but generally we have about 6,000 to 6,500 people that are homeless. And the challenge is for us as a mid-sized community, we have about 2,000 shelter beds. So that's always going to be about 4,500 people that are living on the street. And so we have to figure out a way to get those folks off the street, and you're right, provide them the supportive services that'll help them stay off the street.
Staying on the medical topic, we have an area in Las Vegas, right by where UMC is, Valley Hospital, some medical offices, and a medical school.
Yes.
Known as, the medical district?
It is the medical district. I'm infinitely familiar with the medical district and very proud of it.
Right. And we have, we've been talking about the medical district. There's 2 things in town that we seem to be talking about forever. One is the medical district, and one is the high-speed train from Vegas to LA,
yes,
which is out of your jurisdiction.
I know nothing about a high-speed train. I can spend hours talking about the medical district.
Okay. So what's involved in really making just a fabulous medical district in Las Vegas so people are not saying, hey, the best place to go when you're sick is to Harry Reid Airport?
Yes. So the best thing is you need to have nurses and doctors that know what they're doing and care about you. So
right,
you need to create an environment where nurses and doctors want to be. So there's a lot that's going on, and I would love a couple minutes to talk about that.
Sure.
Significant private and public investment. And then for those who are not aware, the medical district is really the 15 up to about Valley View and Charleston over to Alta. That's essentially the heart of the medical district. In there, you have UMC Hospital. They're going to be going through a $70 million rehab. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of numbers. If you add them up, it's a lot. UMC will go through a $70 million rehab. It'll look like a mid-century modern building. It'll give the feel of what you want to walk into.
Right. So are they just going to modernize the building, or are they going to bring in new equipment, new technology?
New equipment's been happening. They've been remodeling the inside of the building. So this is just the outside of the building to make it look like it should look. Valley Hospital, we just redid their emergency room 2 years ago. The city of Las Vegas has invested in the infrastructure. So right now, Shadow Lane has been completely redone. If you haven't been down Shadow Lane recently, I recommend it. It gives you a taste of what Pinto Lane's going to look like, Charleston's going to look like, and Rancho's going to look like. Rancho between the 95 and Sahara, so that's a big chunk of that community. And then Charleston between 15 and the Rancho. So everything around the medical district is going to have 12 to 15-foot sidewalks, tree-lined streets. The roads are redone, the sewers are redone, the water systems are redone within the medical district. So this is adjacent to UMC. The Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine at UNLV just opened their doors in December. That's a catalyst for everything around it. Over the last legislative session and with the previous governor, I worked with the team of legislators and elected officials around ARP funding. So we have an investment of the state of $75 million for a public health lab.
ARP funding meaning what?
American Rescue Plan. So
Okay.
this is the COVID dollars.
Okay.
So we'll have a public health lab that'll be operated by UMC with some support from the city of Las Vegas at $7 million of American Rescue Plan dollars. And that'll have some biomedical research. We talked to growing our economy. That's a huge component of growing an economy. We're also going to have another structure there that'll have additional pediatric services and significant mental health services and be tied to the university and the overall growth of the medical district. The city and the university have partnered together on land on Wellness Way, and we're going to have a hotel.
Wellness Way being where?
Wellness Way is right off of Martin Luther King,
Okay.
Between Martin Luther King and Shadow.
Okay.
So that's a chunk of land that the city owned, UNLV owned. We partnered together.
Not far from where the Metro headquarters.
Not far at all,
is, right?
down
Yeah.
the street. We will have a hotel, a parking structure, another 100,000 square feet of medical office space. And then those are public investments with private support. And then because of those investments, we're going to have probably around 5 apartment complexes, anywhere between 4 stories and 7 stories, to really make sure those doctors, those nurses have a place to live,
Right,
work,
for
and
the
play.
employees of the hospitals and the
matters.
medical facilities to come so they can work in the area and feel comfortable in the area where they're working. You think that's going to be a major attraction?
I know it will
Yeah.
be. Yes, it's a huge ask. Every time I visit with medical students or dental students, because it's all there, they would love to live near where they work and walk.
Right. And let me ask you this, because we talked about the, I'm sorry, what was the Biden?
ARP funds.
The ARP fund.
Yeah.
Which allocated just a lot of money for certain things everywhere in every state, right? So then it comes to our state, and then I guess they divide it between the cities and the counties, or I don't know how that works, but I guess my question is, once it comes to your desk, how do you decide, okay, the best use of these funds is to go into a medical district? I mean, it seems to me like it is a good idea. I was just wondering, the politics in making it happen.
Yeah. So we had the city of Las Vegas, out of the $3 billion that came into the state of Nevada, the city of Las Vegas had $131 million. And so we did
But that was divided, I mean, how? By population?
by population.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And the federal government did that. So on our desk, we had $131 million to spend. There's relatively few guidelines on how to spend it, with the exception that you have to spend it within a 3-year time period.
Okay.
So we did an open call for pretty much anybody and everybody that wanted to do one of 4 things. Provide housing, because that's our challenge right now. Do something in healthcare, do something around public safety, or do something around business development, because businesses struggled during COVID. And so out of that, we had $131 million. We got about $2.5 billion of requests. And so we started going through and working with all of those requesters to find out how they were going to use the money, if they were viable entities and could spend the money in that time period. And we whittled it down to about $500 million. And then it became a little bit political, where we got to kind of choose, and as a board or as a council, make decisions as to what's in the best interest of the city of Las Vegas. So on every allocation, we had a unanimous vote. We didn't have any divisive votes as to who gets what money. We had a completely unified vision as to what is the best way to spend that money.
Is that typical in the city council? You have unanimous decision making?
I think it is, and I think that's in our form of government. It's a council manager form of government, so we have a strong leadership team on the appointed side, so the city manager and his staff, and they make recommendations. So they do a lot of the vetting, they do a lot of the research, they make recommendations, and then as a board, we make decisions based on their recommendations. So it's fairly typical that we're, I would say, 95% in agreement, and every now and then politics come into play, or we just disagree because we see the world differently, and that's okay too, and you have a little bit of conflict. Conflict's healthy.
I'm speculating, but I guess the entire time you've been at the city, we've had a Goodman as a mayor,
That's true.
right? So almost 20-some years?
Next year will be 25.
25 years, right? So that is going to change.
Yes.
Like everything.
Yes.
Everything in life changes sooner or later, right? So do you see much change after that occurs, or do you think that the city council is kind of like on board, hey, let's follow the mission?
Are you running for mayor?
No.
Okay, just had to check. It depends greatly on who is running for mayor. I think there's a lot of folks that will throw their hat in that I think would do amazing things for the city. I think there'll be some people that probably don't understand government as well as they should. And so it'll be a very different city without a Goodman in it. And we also, at the same time, because of the aging population of the city staff, most of our city manager's office is retiring about the same time too. So we're going to have a new leadership team on the city management side. We'll have a new mayor. It'll be a different city.
Yeah, and that's a positive as well as a negative. I was having a conversation the other night with a state legislator who was saying because of all the new legislators that we have in the state Senate, that they really don't have the background, knowledge, and experience to understand a lot of the concepts that they're trying, some of the bills that they're trying to pass.
Right.
So, I mean, so there is that learning curve when you get somebody new, right? Kind of like a hockey team. All of a sudden, you get a new player, and he's got to learn how the team functions, right?
It is a lot to learn. It's not if whatever professions are out there, it's generally like you do the same thing over and over again. Government is not that. Government is expansive, and it covers every piece of quality of life, and it covers it for people who are in poverty, covers it for people who are super rich, and everything in between. And so, to be an elected official, you really have to have a finger on the pulse of what the community expects and wants. But you have to have a knowledge base of what the city is responsible for, and that's a lot.
Is it hard to be an elected official now? I mean, look, it used to be a very prestigious thing. When I was growing up, people in government were looked up to.
Yeah.
It seems like the more garbage you can throw at an elected politician today, there seems to be more of the common trend, particularly with social media. I had a little bit of a foray in politics. We have a minute left. Is that what you're telling me, Troy? Oh, this is okay. I'll cut to the chase here.
Okay.
Is it disappointing?
I wish people took the time to understand what government can do for them and what government is responsible for, and I wish they understood how important elected officials are. I'm not saying the job is hard. I think the job is great and easy because we have amazing staff. Mm-hmm. My job is to surround myself with very, very, very smart people who have the community's best interests at heart. And I feel we've done that at the City of Las Vegas. So my job is easy because of the people I surround myself with. But politics is very noisy and confusing.
Yeah, and it's tough. Look, I commend anybody who's wants to get out there and put their time and energy into it. And I should mention that you're up for re-election in next election.
Next election,
right?
Yes.
So, hey, this is Brian Knudsen, take a look, check the box.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much.
When sorry is not enough. Enough said. Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.